Welcome on back, everyone, to the All Aussie Rules Footy Podcast. This is episode number 22. This is our round 9 preview of the AFL 2024 season. Welcome on in if you're new. Welcome if you're returning. Welcome back. Another episode here. We've got another big week of football coming up. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And all of those ones, yes, that's correct. I said them all right. And also check me out on all my other socials. We've got Insta, we've got Twitter, we've got TikTok. So check me out anywhere and everywhere. I appreciate you all for tuning in. We'll jump straight into it. There's not a lot in the latest news section to talk about. So we'll pretty much just jump straight into the games. We'll run through all 9 matches for this weekend. And then we'll have a look at my tips. And yeah, that'll be this episode. So thanks for tuning in. And we will jump straight into the first match of the weekend, which is on Thursday night, which is either tomorrow night if you're listening to this as soon as it goes up, or tonight if you're listening to it on Thursday. Otherwise, the game may have already been. But Thursday night at the MCG, big game, Carlton-Melbourne. Should be a cracker. Should be an absolute cracker. We're going to have Carlton Blues 5-3 going up against Melbourne 6-2. 4th versus 8th. Carlton have hit a bit of a rough patch of late, losing 3 games in the last 4 or so weeks. Obviously, the loss against Adelaide was a rough one. The other 2 losses have been against Geelong and Collingwood, so not the worst teams to lose to. Melbourne, meanwhile, they're flying. They 2 weeks ago were pretty average against Richmond, let's be honest, but last week they got the job done against Geelong, the previously undefeated Geelong, so big win for them coming into this match. And you'd have to say on that the form of just last weekend, you're probably going to tip Melbourne in this one. You'd imagine they're probably slightly ahead. Obviously, rematch of the semi-final from last year, in which Carlton got up over the Demons by 2 points in an absolute thriller. Carlton also did win the round 22 match between these two teams by 4 points. So the last 2 times they played, Carlton have won by a combined 6 points. Melbourne will be definitely wanting to turn that one around. They also played in round 12 last year, in which Melbourne won that one by 17 points. You go back to 2022, they only played once. Melbourne won that one by 5 points. 2021, they only played once, and they won by 26 points. So Melbourne had got on a little bit of a run. They'd won 3 in a row. They were more than 3 in a row. They'd won at least 8 in a row by the looks. And then Carlton have turned that around the last 2 times by winning by 4 points and 2 points. I can see it being another tight game. Melbourne probably prioritise defence and low-scoring matches. Carlton, they like to be in free-flowing games. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. All their recent matches between these 2 teams have been pretty low scoring. Last time either of these 2 teams made 100 against each other was in 2019. So typically low scoring, and that will probably favour Melbourne in my opinion. But we'll have to wait and see to fully know that. Comparing the 2 teams, forward efficiency for Carlton is very good. I mean, they're pretty good across the board. Their clearance work had been good, but dropped off a little bit last week. The start of the season average, they then had 3 really good weeks. But last week they definitely dropped off in the clearance game, getting beaten by Collingwood, who are certainly not the best clearance team in the competition. Other than that, what have we got? Melbourne are getting results. I don't think they're playing the best football that they've ever been playing, but they're 6-2. And and sitting fourth on the ladder, so you can't knock them really. You take out a couple bad performances, and their season's been very good. Obviously, the loss against Brisbane in Melbourne. Brisbane are a decent team, but have been struggling. You take out that one, and they could be 7-1 quite easily. And they lost opening round against Sydney, so they are going pretty well. They've obviously got some very good players. I think they probably should start favourites in this, but I can see this going right down to the final minutes. I can't see it being more than 2 or 3 kicks in the game. Which way that ends up favouring, I don't know. I'm leaning towards Melbourne because I just think their defence is better and will be able to stop Carlton, but Carlton do have some very good tall forwards that if any one of those 2 or 3 players get off the chain, they can easily kick 6 or 7 goals and win the game off their own back. So it should be a good game. Should be a big game for Carlton. They need to turn their form around a little bit. Like, they're not getting smashed. They've lost by less than a kick to Collingwood and Adelaide, and they were right in it against Geelong. So while they're not doing terrible, they do need to start getting wins again. But the positive for them is they're 5-3, which is a massive improvement on where they were this time last year. And everyone knows that they made a barnstorming run and just missed top 4, and then obviously beat Melbourne in the semi-final and just went down in the prelim final. So not doom and gloom for them, even though they've had a rough few weeks. Will this be the game they bounce back? We'll wait and see, but I see it being a very close encounter either way. Should be a good game. Friday night we have a double header happening. Not really a double header. They're on at the same time. There's an hour or so in between, so there'll be about half a game of this one starting first, and then they'll cross over for a half, and then the other game will finish a bit later than this one. But first up we have Geelong versus Port Adelaide down at GMHBA Stadium. Geelong finally got knocked off last week by Melbourne. They're sitting 7-1, second on the ladder. They're still in a great spot. Port Adelaide, I know it says 5-2, but they're 5-3. And I just don't know where they're at, to be honest. They're sitting 7th on the ladder, but their last few weeks have not been great. They got beaten reasonably easily by Collingwood. And then last week, even though they did a lot of attacking, they just could not get past Adelaide. So where do they sit at the moment? I'm not convinced either way, to be honest, but it is only, there's still plenty of time for them to find their groove, I guess. Recent encounters between these two teams, they did play each other last year at this stadium in round 21. Geelong won that one by 12 points, and last year Port Adelaide were probably the better of these two teams, they finished top 4 where Geelong missed the finals. They also played at Adelaide Oval, and Port Adelaide won that one. In 2022 they played at Adelaide Oval and Port Adelaide won that, and then they also played at GMHBA Stadium and Geelong won that one. So it tends to be, over the last couple of years at least, the home team wins. The last time the home team didn't win was 2021 when Geelong went to Adelaide Oval and won by 20 points. So where does that sit us? You'd have to go with Geelong on, I guess, form of the season. The fact that it's at their home ground all points towards a Geelong win. However, Port Adelaide's best is very, very good. So if they do manage to bring their best, they could be right in this. It's a big night for Tom Hawkins. Obviously, it ties up Joel Selwood for the most amount of games for Geelong. So a big night for him. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him kick a mini bag, maybe 3 or 4. He obviously played very well in his 350th. He's been quiet since, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see him do all right. Differences between these two teams. Obviously, Geelong is very good attacking. They're very good defensively, sitting fourth in the league at both. Um, so, yeah, they're probably looking good. But Port Adelaide aren't bad either. They're sixth at attacking and seventh at defence. So, they're right up there. Difference, obviously, accuracy. Port Adelaide have been struggling. It cost them the game last week. It's not the first time that they've been hurt by some poor kicking in front of goal. However, they're very good at getting shots from their forward 50 entries because they don't. For a team that gets it forward so often, they get shots a lot, but just they're converting when they have shots is their issue. You would think a team that is getting as many shots as they are should be averaging over 100 points. But they're not. They're averaging 89.88, so they just got that inability at the moment to convert and put teams away. Clearances is going to likely be dominated by Port Adelaide. They have been the much better team of these two at clearances, so I would imagine that's probably how it goes again, and Geelong will rely on their intercept game, their turnover game, and their transition game. That's how they play football. That's where they're at their best, and once they do that, kicking straight, getting enough on the board, and winning the games that's kind of where they're at, I think. Both teams tackle pretty well, so I would imagine we will see a pretty fierce game in that regard. And yeah, that's how I see it. I'm going Geelong just based on what I've said. They've got the home ground advantage. They're probably the slightly better team on current form, I think. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Geelong v Port Adelaide. We then jump over to Optus Stadium. This is starting at 8:30 Australian Eastern Standard Time. Fremantle Sydney. Fremantle in the spotlight on Friday night. Obviously against another game which is a little bit interesting, but they still get a Friday night clash. This time against the top of the ladder Sydney Swans. 7-1 for the Swans, 5-3 for the Dockers. So both teams sitting right up there. Fremantle have won their last two after they'd lost 3 in a row, so they're getting back into form. They obviously went to the MCG to beat Richmond quite convincingly on the weekend. It wasn't a massive margin most of the way. They did manage 7 goals in the last quarter to kick away. But yeah, they're back in form. Sydney, they were chugging along. They were very good last week against GWS. So last year they did play each other in round 19 at Optus Stadium. That was won by Sydney actually by 29 points. They also played at the SCG last year, which was won by Fremantle by 17 points. So last year they were split the two games, but the away team won both of them, which is an interesting little stat. 2022 they also played at Optus Stadium, and Sydney won that one as well by 17 points. So you have to go all the way back to 2021 for the last time Fremantle beat Sydney at Optus Stadium, which is an interesting little stat that the last two times have been won by Sydney. And I think at the moment it looks like Sydney are probably going to start favourites in this. They are probably the better team on paper and on record. The Sydney midfield is just another level on everybody. But if there is a midfield that's going to take it up to Sydney, it is probably Fremantle. They have Sarong, they have Fife. They just, dominant in the clearance game, and it'll be interesting to see if they can stop that Sydney domination through Grundy, Heaney, Warner, and everybody else in the Sydney midfield. They just all seem to dominate week in, week out. Obviously, number one offense is Sydney in the AFL. number 2 defence is Fremantle. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Fremantle play a lot lower scoring games than Sydney do. So that will play out interestingly, I think. Fremantle, they don't dominate territory. For a team that dominates clearances, they're the number 1 clearance team in the competition, but they get beaten in inside 50s pretty much every week, which is interesting. I would like to see them get a little bit better at controlling the play after getting the clearance. Sydney, they're just pretty much a well-rounded team on current form. As you can see, they're pretty much ranked in the top 8 for everything important that's on the screen. Forward efficiency, the 5th. Inside 50 differential, the 3rd. Disposal efficiency, the 8th. And they have played games in the wet, so that's a good effort to still be an 8th. Clearance differential is 4th. Tackling differential is 4th. So they're a very consistent team on the season. You take out their one loss to Richmond, which we just put down to a blimp on the radar at the moment. And they're going very, very well. So they will start favourites, but I'm not 100% convinced they'll win this. I think Fremantle have a lot more on the line than Sydney do. So we'll see how that plays out. But I'll probably be tipping Fremantle in this one, but it could easily go either way. I'm not convinced either way on who will win. It should be a good game, hopefully. Next up is the first Saturday game down at Utah Stadium in Launceston. We got Hawthorn versus St Kilda. The 2-6 Hawks, who got their win over the Bulldogs last week, were sitting 16th on the ladder, and St Kilda, who are 3-5, sitting 14th on the ladder. What to say about these two teams? Neither of them are flying. They both won last week. Just to give them a little bit of confidence going in. Obviously, Hawthorn have a very good record down at Utah Stadium, so we will probably wouldn't rule them out no matter who they were playing really. But on paper, I think St Kilda looked the better team. Whether that plays out or not, we'll see. This is the first time these two teams have played each other down in Launceston since 2018. They played each other 2017 and 2018. They were split. St Kilda won the 2017 game by 70 odd points, and then the next year Hawthorn managed to win that one by 35 points. Recent years, last year they played each other twice. They split them, one apiece. Both games were at Marvel. 22, they played twice, and St Kilda won both of them. So St Kilda probably have the slight edge over recent years, which isn't that surprising because Hawthorn have not had the best 2 or 3 year span. So we'll see. They did very well last week though. They got a win against the Bulldogs when they certainly weren't expected to. As you can see, they're 16th in offence and 17th in defence, Hawthorn, so that's not something that fills you with huge amount of confidence on their part on how they're going offensively and defensively. Their accuracy is average, their forward efficiency is average, their inside 50 differentials average, their clearance differential and their tackling differential is the worst in the league, so it'll be interesting. However, St Kilda's tackling differential is also very, very low, so that suggests that we're not going to see a great game of tackling, but you never know. We'll see what happens. St Kilda will probably, you would imagine, based on numbers and what we've seen so far, will probably dominate the middle, the centre game, and it's just going to be a matter of whether they can turn that into ground position and then convert that into shots and scores. St Kilda have the slightly better offence than Hawthorn and have a much more consistent defence than Hawthorn, so you'd think at neutral peak conditions St Kilda probably win this. The fact that it's at Utah Stadium certainly brings Hawthorn closer to it, in my opinion, but will it be enough to get Hawthorn over the line? I'm not convinced. I'll be picking St Kilda in this, but only just. Hawthorn obviously are in their best form, that better form than what we expected them to be. So if they are going to get a win over St Kilda, this is probably their perfect ideal situation, coming off a win, confidence, and going down to Utah Stadium. So that's the first game of Saturday. After that one, we head into Melbourne for Marvel, and two teams that both will want to win this. Two teams that are sitting right up there on the ladder. Essendon hosting GWS. Essendon are fifth on the ladder, they're flying along. GWS are sitting third on the ladder. Should be a good game, I think. Obviously, Essendon are in fine form. They've only lost one game in their last 5 weeks. GWS, their form has been a little bit more scratchy. They've had a few injuries, a few players coming in and out. They're still 6-2 on the year, so they're certainly not going badly. The main thing GWS does well is just scores. They score heavily. They get the ball forward, +2 inside 50s a game. They have good forward efficiency, so they get lots of shots, and they kick straight when they're kicking for goal. And in the end, that's pretty much what sums up GWS football. They're certainly got a lot of good young talent on their team, and older talent, more experienced players too are very good. It'll be interesting to see if Tom Green plays. I haven't heard anything over the last couple of days. He obviously hurt himself in the opening minutes against Sydney last week. So we'll see how that goes. Essendon, they're coming back from a win over in the West. A big... it was probably a bit of a taxing game on visuals of what I saw. A lot of players were very spent towards the end. They've then had to travel back to Melbourne from over there, so I know the West teams travel every week, but it's not going to be an easy trip. It's a 7-day turnaround, but the fact that the game was a very taxing game, players from both teams were absolutely spent in that last 15-20 minutes of the game on Saturday night. So if Essendon were a little flat, I wouldn't be surprised here. But they have surprised me many times this year with how well they're going. It's not the first time in the last few years where they have started a season pretty well, and the last 2 years they've dropped off after that. So we'll see if they can turn that around this year and keep it going. The thing is, if they get this win, they don't have the toughest 4 or 5 weeks after that. So if they manage to get another upset win over GWS here, all of a sudden they're 6-2-1, and going into the bye they could well be almost on 10 wins. I don't know exactly when their bye is, but they'll be up around the 10 win mark, and from that point you're not really going to miss finals unless you fully fall apart. What do Essendon do? They just stay in games. Their accuracy is 6th in the league, and would be higher if they didn't have that game against Adelaide a couple of weeks ago, which they managed to win, but they were very poor in front of goal. Their main winning source, and what's been probably the staple of their game, is their clearances. Led 2 weeks ago against Collingwood, that was the main reason they were dominating that game. Early and staying in it late was the fact that they just kept winning clearances, and Collingwood had no answer for that. Obviously, Collingwood played a better rebound game, but getting first hands on the ball can be very beneficial, and especially when you get your tail up a bit and you keep winning clearances, you can pound on some goals very quickly. I think GWS win this. They're going to come down wanting to win. They've lost 2 games in the last few weeks. Obviously, they lost to Sydney last week. They're going to be, I would imagine, up and about trying to win this game. I just think they probably score too much for Essendon to keep up here. The offense of GWS can get a very high score very quickly, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them get 125, 130, and Essendon probably end up around the 100 mark. is my prediction. I think it will probably be a very high-scoring game. That's my read on the situation. It'll probably be a free-flowing, hard-running game, and it's just going to be a matter of who converts their opportunities, because both teams will create plenty of opportunities. It's just going to be who converts those half chances into full chances and puts them into goals. Saturday night football. First up, we head to Darwin. Gold Coast, North Melbourne. Gold Coast 4-4. They were pretty average last week against Brisbane. North Melbourne obviously have not won a game yet. They're sitting bottom of the ladder and not a lot going right for them. Recent seasons, last year, round 24, they played each other down at Blunston Arena, and that is the game that cost North Melbourne Harley Reid. They won that one over Gold Coast by 35 points, which got them off the bottom of the ladder. They also played in round 6, which Gold Coast won that one by 40 points on the Gold Coast. In 2022, they did play each other at TIO Stadium, which is where this one is at. And Gold Coast managed to win that one by 52 points. So Gold Coast have a pretty good record against North Melbourne. I mean, if you look through the AFL, most teams over the last 3 or 4 years have a very good record against North Melbourne, so no surprise that Gold Coast also do. You just can't see Gold Coast losing this. If they do lose this, if somehow Gold Coast lose this, you can just put a pin in their season. They are done. At the moment, they're 4-4. Those 4 wins were all on the Gold Coast. The 4 losses have been everywhere but the Gold Coast. So even though this isn't on the Gold Coast, it is still a home game for them. You just can't see North Melbourne kicking enough to win. Like, they have 17th. They're 17th for scoring, so that's 69.88 points per game, which is very, very low, and they're 18th for defence. They just concede so many points every game. Too many opportunities, and their scoring would probably be a lot worse if it wasn't for their last quarters and the fact that they kick very, very straight. They lead the league in accuracy when kicking for goal. Inside 50 differential is going to be a huge factor in this game. Gold Coast 4th in the league at +3. North Melbourne worst in the league at -15. Even the clearances as well, Gold Coast should dominate. So I can't see a world where Gold Coast don't come out, get first hands on the ball, get the ball going forward and scoring. I just don't see how North Melbourne can keep up with anybody at the moment. And I think Gold Coast matches up well against North Melbourne. If they bring their best, Gold Coast don't lose this. There's not a chance. But if they don't show up, if they play like they did last week, which was pretty ordinary against a depleted Brisbane team, they could lose. The other Saturday night game is at the MCG. I was about to say Marvel, it's definitely at the MCG. We got the Tiggies, Richmond, hosting the Bulldogs. 17th on the ladder versus 11th on the ladder. Both teams are 1-4 across the last 5 weeks. Bulldogs obviously started the season pretty well. They were 2-1. 2-1. They might have even been 3-1. And they were looking very good. Things have fallen apart. No, they must have been 2-1, 3-2, maybe. Anyway, Richmond, they're sitting 1-7. They got that one win against Sydney against all odds. So they're capable, but they are very depleted and injury rattled at the moment. So you'd imagine the Bulldogs will be too good. How the Bulldogs are going as bad as they are is beyond me. I wouldn't write their season off just yet. I know they'd lost all off on last week. They were obviously ordinary against Essendon about a month ago, which was kind of the start of their downfall, I think. But then they were very good the week after against St Kilda. Their best is good enough to be top 4 team in my opinion. Unfortunately, their worst comes out too often, and that is not a top 8 team. Offensively, they're very good. Defensively, they're okay. Forward efficiency is very good. They're good at getting the ball forward. They're good at getting it out of the centre and out of clearances. They tackle well, but somehow they just don't convert this into wins. Richmond, meanwhile, across the board, they're just not even in the top 10 on anything. They don't get the ball. They don't use the ball well. They don't transition the ball well. Understandable. They are missing a lot of players. But it's just the situation is at the moment. They're just not up to beating many teams. So I would be very surprised to see them beat the Bulldogs. But I also didn't think Hawthorn would beat the Bulldogs last weekend. So we'll see how that plays out. So we got Bulldogs last year. Where did they play? They played at Marvel, and Bulldogs won that one convincingly. They also played in round 4 at the MCG, so same ground as this one. And Richmond did get that win by 5 points. And Bulldogs were pretty solid early on in the year last year, so that was a big win for Richmond last year. The year before, they also played in round 4 at the MCG. Richmond won that one by 38 points. In 2021, they played each other in round 7 at the MCG. Richmond won that by 22 points. So at least the last 5 times that these two teams have played at the MCG, Richmond has won. Granted, they have not been as good as they had for those 5 matches, but it certainly points that give Richmond a fighting chance in this. I think the Bulldogs are going to come out and absolutely want to thrash this game to put it to pieces, kind of like they came out against St Kilda 3 weeks ago. There's a bit of heat on the players and the coach and everyone at the Bulldogs at the moment. They have recycled a few players out and bring in some young talent, so it's not doom and gloom for them by any stretch, but they have to win these sort of games. You can't go losing to Richmond when you're 3 and 5 and hope to make finals. If they drop to 3 and 6, their season is quickly getting away from them. However, they win this, they go 4 and 5, and just breathes a little bit of life back into their season. So that's the end of Saturday football. We have 2 games on Sunday. First up, at Marvel Stadium, it's Collingwood versus West Coast. Collingwood, their season has certainly improved. They obviously started 0-3. Since then, they've gone 4 wins and a draw. West Coast, their season also has improved. They started doom and gloom. They lost their first few and were looking horrible. Since gather round, their football has looked a lot better. Their numbers have looked a lot better. They almost stole the win against Essendon last week, which would have been huge for the club, but they couldn't quite get there. Not an easy game for them though here. As I said when we were talking about the Essendon game, last week was a taxing game. A lot of the Eagles players were out on their feet, but they're young players. They should be fine. I think they should bounce back. A lot of players out for both teams. Collingwood missing Mitchell, DeGoey, Lockie Schultz, Brody Myercheck, amongst some other long-term injuries. Eagles, they're also missing Waterman. I haven't heard if Yo's playing or not. He obviously got injured last week. So it will be interesting to see how the Eagles line up. Obviously, Waterman out for them is a massive loss. He's been their main avenue to goal, certainly since their form reversal. Since their form has improved, he's been the key barometer for that. He's kicking goals and multiple goals every week. So if he is out. I know for a fact he's not playing. So it will be interesting to see how who they use as their, obviously Darling's still up there, but I don't think he's at his best. I think his best is probably past him, but you never know. He has played some very good games against Collingwood in the past. Also, Collingwood also have Beau McQuarrie out with concussion after copping a knee last week. These two teams head to head. Last year they only played once, which was over at Optus Stadium. Collingwood won that convincingly. Obviously, Collingwood were the premiers last year, whereas West Coast were wooden spooners. So you kind of expect that even over there. 2022, they only played once. That was at Marvel Stadium, same ground as this. Collingwood lost that by 13 points. That was early on in the season. Collingwood were out for the count that year early on. And then all of a sudden made a second half of the season run. It was a couple of weeks after their loss to West Coast that their season really turned around in 2022. 2021 obviously was a bad year for Collingwood, but they did manage to beat West Coast. At least the one in Melbourne. They lost the one over at Optus Stadium. So not a resounding record either team, but the fact that it's in Melbourne, they've only played each other at Marvel Stadium once in the last 6 or 7 years, and Collingwood lost that, which is not a great sign for them. But I think the fact that Collingwood have, especially the last month, really ramped up that tackle pressure, I think that might be too much for West Coast. As you can see, plus 12.5 first in the league versus minus 10.2 and 17th in the league. If Collingwood bring that pressure, it's hard to see West Coast winning this. West Coast also struggle at getting it forward, but they are efficient when they go forward. But will that be different with Waterman not in the team and as that main vocal point to convert entries into scores? We'll see, but it's hard to go against Collingwood. They haven't lost since round 2. They're flying in most ways. Obviously, they had the draw against Essendon, whereas the Eagles, they're certainly improving. They're doing a lot better than me and most people thought they would be, so it's not doom and gloom for them, but their season doesn't rely on them winning this game. It's a trip to Melbourne against what was expected to be one of the better Melbourne teams, so don't get me wrong, they'll be going there with all intention of trying to win, but it's not the end of the world if they don't. Whereas if Collingwood don't win this, it certainly makes their season a lot harder at 4.5 wins from 9 games. That leaves us with one match left to look at. Sunday evening, starting at 3:30 Adelaide time. It is Adelaide versus Brisbane. And while not the end of the season for the loser, it certainly makes the season very, very difficult. Both teams 3 and 5. Both starting to show some good form after very ordinary starts to the season. 12th and 13th on the ladder. Both teams won last week in their respective crosstown rivalry matches. Adelaide beating Port Adelaide at Adelaide Oval and Brisbane beating Gold Coast at the Gabba. This one in Adelaide gives Adelaide a bit of an advantage there. Brisbane also have lost a few players from last week. Obviously they didn't play last week because they got injured in the opening minutes, but that could wear a bit of a toll. Plus a lot of players played big minutes for Brisbane last week with nobody on the bench really, so it wouldn't surprise me to see them struggle a little bit with legs this week. Recent meetings between these two teams, Brisbane beat Adelaide in round 22 at the Gabba last year. Round 11 they played at the Adelaide Oval and Adelaide won that one by 17 points. Brisbane were the better team last year, so were a better team than Adelaide, so you'd imagine the fact that Adelaide beat them last year at Adelaide Oval is a suggestion that they're probably good enough to win again at the Adelaide Oval. Round 9 2022, Brisbane won that one at the Adelaide Oval. And 2021 they also played at Adelaide Oval, and Brisbane won that one as well. So 2 out of the 3 have been won by Brisbane at Adelaide Oval. How many times can I say that in the space of a minute? But the last time they played at Adelaide Oval was won by Adelaide, 95-78. So on that, and the fact that Brisbane are just struggling a little bit with injuries, it makes me think that I'm going to be tipping Adelaide. But it should be a good, cracking game to finish the round. As far as I can see, it should go most of the way to the end, right to the wire, I would imagine. Neither team very good offensively. Both very poor forward efficiently. Like, they both... Brisbane have a very good inside 50 differential. Adelaide are pretty neutral. But they both are very average at converting those inside 50s into goals. Hence why they're the 12th and 14th best scoring teams in the AFL. Defensively, though, they're both very good, 5th and 6th. So, based on that, you'd expect a low-scoring game. Adelaide have played in a lot of low-scoring games this year. Brisbane, at their best, though, are a high-scoring team. So, if they manage to turn their forward 50 entries into shots and goals, then yes, Brisbane will probably score highly. But their forward line just has not been really working well this year. Charlie Cameron's down on form. Joe Danaher's slightly down on form. So is Eric Hipwood, who is really struggling in my opinion. So they're just kind of struggling to get scores on the board. They definitely have the talent. They showed it last year. They only just missed out on winning a premiership. So it's not doom and gloom for them, but they need to start turning their forward line, their midfield and backline domination into scoring. Adelaide, they've certainly turned their season around. I had them finishing top 8 at the start of the year. After a few weeks, I'd almost written them off, but they're showing now what they're capable of. They'll probably be kicking themselves for a couple of those early season results. But can't do anything about that now. They just need to go out and they need to win games like this at Adelaide Oval against Brisbane. So that's our 9 matches for this week. We will have a look now at my tips just to round out this episode. So Thursday night I've gone Carlton by 13 points over Melbourne. I just think that Carlton need this more than Melbourne. They're going to want to win this. Both teams are very good at their best. I think Carlton's best is a little bit more consistent than Melbourne's best, but we'll see what happens there. Could go either way. Geelong should beat Port Adelaide in Geelong. They're the better team in my opinion, and Port Adelaide just aren't quite flying as much as perhaps we thought they were a few weeks back. The other Friday night game, Fremantle over Sydney in Freo. This is a bit of an upset. Sydney are favourites. Something tells me Freo will really come into this wanting to win. They match up pretty well against Sydney. Both teams' best area of the ground is the midfield, so it's going to be a battle of the midfields, I think, and who can get the ball forward and then give their forward lines an opportunity. Fremantle's defence, I also think, is very good. So I think they'll be able to take care of certainly a lot of the Sydney forwards, whether someone like Will Haywood comes in and kicks 3 or 4 goals again like he did last week. That might be different, but I think the Fremantle defence is very good. Saturday, I have St Kilda winning over Hawthorn. If Hawthorn are going to win a game against St Kilda, this is probably the ideal situation, but I just think St Kilda are a better team. Saturday afternoon, also in Melbourne, GWS I have beating Essendon. Essendon are flying. I've got them wrong many weeks this year, and this may well be another one that I get wrong, but after last week's tough game for Essendon, I just don't know if they'll be bouncing back perfectly, and I think GWS really will want to win this game. Their season while not getting away from them, they're still above 500. There's plenty of time left in the season. They'll want to win this to make up for a couple losses that maybe they didn't want to get over the last couple of weeks. Saturday night, we have Gold Coast beating North Melbourne. Eventually, North Melbourne will win a game, but what we've seen this year, I can't see it being anytime soon. It wouldn't surprise me if they didn't win a game all year based on what they're doing at the moment. You kind of feel bad for them, but they're just not showing much life at all. The other game on Saturday night, I have Bulldogs winning convincingly over Richmond. I think they'll bring their best. They'll want to win this, and I can just see this being exactly the same as the St Kilda game. They'll come in absolutely fired up and win this one convincingly. Sunday, I think Collingwood will do enough to beat West Coast. I think West Coast will fight and be in this a lot of the way, but I think Collingwood will edge their way over the line at the end. And then the final game of the round, I have Adelaide beating Brisbane in what should be a cracker and a very important game for both teams, but I'm going the way of Adelaide. So yeah, that's my tips for round 9. That is the end of this episode. Thank you everyone for tuning in. That is the 9 matches. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Comment, let me know what you think of my tips, what you think of your favourite team. Are they going to win this weekend? Don't forget also to follow me on all my social medias. We've got Twitter, we've got Instagram, we've got TikTok, and we do have Facebook. So check us out. We're all Aussie rules on all of them. No spaces, I don't think, on any of them. So just all Aussie rules. Thanks again for tuning in. I'll be back on Monday night with the next episode. Hopefully, I am going to a few games over in Melbourne this weekend, so we might be a little bit scratchy, but we'll give our best to get an episode out Monday night. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. Catch us next time.